My name is Alina Vance, and I live in the heart of Spartanburg, South Carolina, where the summer air feels like a warm, wet blanket and the hum of industry never really stops. I am 38 years old now, but the events that changed my life forever started a few years back when I was 37. I have always been the kind of person who finds beauty in the way things are made. While other girls were playing with dolls, I was taking apart my toaster to see how the heating elements worked. That curiosity led me to a career as a manufacturing engineer. For nearly 5 years, I worked for a large company that manufactured high-end fishing gear. We made everything from professional-grade reels to the complex packaging that kept the lures from getting tangled on the store shelves. I loved my job because it was a puzzle that never ended. My world revolved around the sound of conveyor belts and the rhythmic hiss of pneumatic presses. I was good at what I did, and for a long time I believed that hard work was the only currency that mattered in the professional world. In my 4th year at the fishing company, the process engineer quit unexpectedly to take a job in another state. Instead of hiring a replacement, the company asked me to take on those responsibilities as well. I saw it as a massive opportunity to prove myself and move up the ladder. I wanted to show them that I was indispensable. I started working 16-hour days, arriving before the sun came up and leaving long after the stars were out. My life became a cycle of heavy machinery and caffeine. I was drinking 2 or 3 Monster energy drinks every single day just to keep my heart beating fast enough to stay awake. I was on call 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. If a machine broke at 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone would buzz and I would be back in my boots and out the door within 10 minutes. I felt like a hero in a hard hat, but there was one person who refused to see me that way. My direct manager was a man I will call Rick, but everyone in the break room had much meaner names for him. Rick was the kind of person who felt small unless he was making someone else feel even smaller. He was a tall man with silver hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. From the moment he took over the department, he seemed to have a personal vendetta against me. I never understood why. I was the most productive person on his team, but he treated me like a nuisance. He would call meetings just to criticize my ideas in front of the other department heads. If I suggested a way to speed up the packaging line by 5%, he would scoff and tell me my math was wrong, only to pull a male colleague aside an hour later and tell him to implement my exact idea. He tried to make me look incompetent and weak at every turn. He would assign me the dirtiest and most physically demanding teardowns, knowing I would do them without complaining, while he sat in his air-conditioned office and checked his stock portfolio. My coworkers saw what was happening and they worried about me. They saw the dark circles under my eyes and the way my hands shook from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But Rick just wanted more. He was a black hole of expectations, and no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. Then came the first of the month in 2015. It started like any other Tuesday. I was out on the floor with a heavy wrench in my hand, working on a full teardown of a packaging line that had been jammed since the night shift. I was covered in grease and sweat, thinking about the fact that the next day was my 38th birthday. I was planning to treat myself to a nice dinner and finally get more than 4 hours of sleep. As I was working, I started to notice a strange energy in the plant. People were huddling in small groups and whispering. Then I saw a woman from the accounting department walking toward the exit. She was crying and carrying a cardboard box filled with her desk plants and a stapler. A security guard was walking right behind her. My heart sank into my stomach. I dropped my wrench and wiped my hands on a rag. I walked over to my best friends in the assembly area and asked them what was going on. They looked as scared as I felt. Rumors of a layoff had been floating around for months, but management had always denied them. Suddenly, the overhead speakers crackled to life. A voice from Human Resources began calling names. Each name called was a person who had to report to the front office immediately. It felt like a slow-motion nightmare. I walked back toward my cubicle, hoping that my 5 years of dedication and my 16-hour days would protect me. I thought, surely they cannot let go of the only person doing 2 jobs. But at exactly 8:30 in the morning, I heard it. My name was called over the intercom. Alina Vance, please report to the Human Resources office. The walk to the front of the building felt like it took 100 years. When I walked into the room, I saw a woman from Human Resources and a man I did not recognize. Rick was not there. He did not even have the courage to look me in the eye. They gave me the standard speech about how my position was being eliminated due to a corporate restructuring. They told me I had no job and no insurance starting immediately. They offered me 4 months of severance pay, which felt like a slap in the face since I was only 1 month away from my 5-year anniversary, which would have triggered a much larger payout. I was destroyed. I had never received a bad performance review in my entire career. I had never even been put on a performance improvement plan. I had given that company my blood and my sweat, and they were tossing me out like a broken part. I had to be escorted back to my desk to pack my things. I was crying so hard I could barely see the pictures of my family on my desk. My lead packaging engineer saw me being led by the security guard, and he started shouting that this was total garbage. He knew how hard I worked. He knew that without me, the lines would stop running within a week. But Rick had made the choice. Every department manager had to pick one person to sacrifice, and Rick had chosen me. He wouldn't even come out of his office to say goodbye. He made his second-in-command stand there and watch me put my stapler in a box. The ride home was a blur of tears and anger. I spent my 38th birthday the next day sitting on my couch in my pajamas drinking beer with my best friends and wondering how I was going to pay my mortgage. As the days went by, I learned more about what had happened. It turned out that a giant conglomerate was buying our company, and they wanted the books to look as profitable as possible before the sale. To do that, they decided to slash the payroll. They let go of dozens of people. Most of them were women, and several of them were older managers who were just a year or two away from retirement. It was a cold and calculated move. But what hurt the most was knowing that there were people in my department who actually wanted to leave. One man told me later that he would have gladly taken the severance package because he was ready to retire anyway. Another guy was already on a performance improvement plan for being caught sleeping in the break room, but Rick kept him and fired me instead. I felt shattered and lost. I felt like I had been discarded by a world I had worked so hard to build. I allowed myself one day to be completely miserable. I stayed in bed and let the darkness take over. But on the second day after my birthday, I woke up and realized that I was still an engineer. I still had my skills and my brain. I hit the job sites with everything I had. I treated the job hunt like a 16-hour-a-day job. I polished my resume until it shone, and I reached out to every contact I had made in the industry. 1 month later, I landed a new job at a different manufacturing plant about 20 miles away. It was a breath of fresh air. The culture was different. People smiled at each other in the hallways. My new boss, a man named Dave, actually listened to my ideas. For the first time in years, I felt like a human being instead of a machine. I stopped drinking 3 Monsters a day. I started sleeping 8 hours a night. I realized that getting fired was the best thing that could have happened to me, even if it felt like the end of the world at the time. Life moved on, and I forgot about Rick and the fishing company, or at least I tried to. About 6 months after I started my new job, I was sitting at my desk working on a layout for a new assembly line. My cubicle was located right outside the office of the plant director. Dave, the director, was a great guy who had become a bit of a mentor to me. We often joked around, and he respected my work. One morning, Dave poked his head out of his office and called my name. He asked me to come inside for a minute. I walked in with a smile and asked him what was up. He was holding a piece of paper and looking at it with a curious expression. He asked me if I used to work at the fishing gear company, and I told him that I did. Then he asked the question that made my heart skip a beat. He asked if I knew a man named Rick. I felt a chill go down my spine as I confirmed that Rick had been my manager for years. Dave leaned back in his chair and asked me what kind of man Rick was to work for. He said that he had Rick's resume on his desk and that Rick was applying for the plant manager position at our company. I took a deep breath. I could have lied. I could have been professional and said he was a hard worker. But then I remembered the way I felt being escorted out of the building the day before my birthday. I remembered the 16-hour days he took for granted and the way he stole my ideas. I looked Dave right in the eye and I smiled. I told him that Rick was an okay person, I suppose, but that he was an absolutely world-class bus driver. Dave looked confused for a second and asked me what I meant by that. I told him that Rick had a very special talent for throwing his best employees under the bus whenever it suited him. I explained how he had treated the women in the department and how he had chosen to fire his most productive engineer during a merger just because of a personal grudge. Dave's expression changed from curiosity to disgust. He didn't say another word. He took Rick's resume and held it over the large blue recycling bin next to his desk. He looked at me one more time and then he ripped the resume into tiny little pieces and let them flutter into the bin. He said that was all he needed to know. I walked out of that office with my jaw nearly hitting the floor. I found out later through the grapevine that Rick had been let go the exact same day I was. The conglomerate didn't need him either once the merger was finalized. He had been unemployed for 6 months, and he was clearly getting desperate if he was applying for positions at smaller plants like ours. He had spent his career stepping on people to get ahead, and now there was no one left to catch him. He had unknowingly handed me the opportunity to settle the score. I didn't have to scream or shout. I didn't have to break any laws. I just had to tell the truth. The realization that I had cost him the job he so desperately needed was the best birthday present I ever received, even if it was 6 months late. I went back to my desk and continued working on my assembly line layout, feeling lighter than I had in years. It is funny how the world works. Rick thought he was the one in control when he stood in his office and watched me carry my box to the car. He thought he had won, but he forgot that the manufacturing world is small and people talk. He forgot that you should never burn a bridge when the person on the other side might be the one holding the fire extinguisher later on. Now every time I pass by a fishing gear store, I just smile. I am happy in my new job, and I am respected for my work. I have a life outside of the factory, and I don't need caffeine to get through the day. As for Rick, I heard he eventually had to move out of the state to find work in a completely different industry. I like to think that somewhere out there, he is still trying to figure out why his career stalled out. But I know why. It is because karma has a way of finding you, especially in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I learned that being a good engineer is about more than just fixing machines. It is about how you treat the people who run them. I will never forget the look of that ripped-up resume falling into the trash. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen engineered. My life continued to improve after that day. The plant I was working at decided to expand, and because Dave trusted me so much, he put me in charge of the entire expansion project. It was a massive undertaking that involved coordinating with contractors and overseeing the installation of millions of dollars worth of equipment. I was busy, but it was a different kind of busy. It wasn't the frantic and desperate energy I had felt under Rick. It was a purposeful and rewarding challenge. I found myself leading a team of younger engineers, and I made a promise to myself that I would never be like the man who tried to ruin me. I took the time to listen to their ideas, and I made sure they got the credit they deserved. I realized that a leader is only as strong as the people they support. One afternoon, about a year after the resume incident, I was at a local hardware store picking up some supplies for a home project. I saw a man who looked familiar standing in the plumbing aisle. He was older, and his hair was thinner, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. As I got closer, I realized it was Rick's former second in command, the man who had been forced to walk me out of the building. He saw me and his eyes widened. He looked like he wanted to run away, but instead he stopped and said hello. We talked for a few minutes, and the conversation eventually turned to the fishing company. He told me that after the merger went through, the new owners realized they had made a huge mistake by letting go of the engineering staff. The packaging lines had started breaking down, and no one knew how to fix them because all the documentation had been in my head and on my personal drives that they had wiped. They lost millions of dollars in production delays. Rick had tried to take credit for fixing the issues, but he didn't have the technical knowledge to back it up. That was why he was fired so quickly after the layoff. The second in command told me that Rick's reputation in the local manufacturing community was completely destroyed. No one would hire him because word had gotten out about his management style and the disaster at the fishing company. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. I wasn't just happy because I had gotten my revenge. I was happy because I saw that the system actually worked sometimes. The people who do the work and care about the quality of their output are the ones who survive in the long run. The people who play politics and hurt others for their own gain eventually run out of people to step on. I thanked the man for the information and wished him well. I walked out of the store into the bright South Carolina sunshine, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I drove home to my house, which I was still paying for thanks to my new and better job. I thought about the irony of the situation. Rick had tried to take everything from me on the day before my birthday, but in doing so, he had given me a new life. He had pushed me out of a toxic environment and into a place where I could truly thrive. He had been the catalyst for my success, even though he had intended to be the cause of my failure. I spent that evening sitting on my porch watching the fireflies dance in the grass. I realized that revenge isn't always about doing something mean back to someone. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living a good life and being there to tell the truth when it matters most. Rick had built his career on a foundation of lies and ego, and it had crumbled under the weight of his own actions. I had built mine on hard work and integrity, and it was stronger than ever. I still work as a manufacturing engineer, and I still love what I do. Every time I see a new resume come across my desk, I think of Dave and the blue recycling bin. I make sure to look for the people who are dedicated and passionate, and I give them the chance that Rick refused to give me. I am Alina Vance, and I am more than just a line on a spreadsheet. I am a builder and a solver and a survivor. And I know that in the end, the truth always has a way of coming out, especially when you are a world-class bus driver like Rick. I often think about that moment in Dave's office and how quickly things can change. One sentence was all it took to change the course of Rick's life, just like one meeting had changed mine. But the difference was that my sentence was based on the reality of his behavior, while his decision to fire me was based on his own insecurities. It makes me wonder how many other people he had treated that way over the years, and how many of them had also found their way to a better place. Spartanburg is a city of industry, but it is also a city of stories. Everyone has a story about a bad boss or a hard job, but not everyone gets the chance to see justice served so neatly. I feel lucky that I got to see the end of that chapter. It allowed me to close the book on that part of my life and move forward without any bitterness. I don't hate Rick anymore. I don't have the energy for that. I just feel a sort of pity for him. He spent so much time trying to be the most powerful person in the room that he forgot how to be a decent human being. And in the end, that was his downfall. He lost his job, his reputation, and his influence, all because he couldn't handle seeing a woman succeed in his department. I have learned to trust my instincts more. If a situation feels wrong, I don't just put my head down and work harder anymore. I speak up. I make sure that I am in an environment that values me. I have also learned the importance of balance. I still work hard, but I don't let it consume me. I don't drink Monster energy drinks anymore. I drink water and tea, and I make sure to spend time with my friends and family. My career is important, but it is not the only thing that defines me. I am a sister, a daughter, a friend, and a gardener. I am a person who enjoys the quiet moments as much as the busy ones. The fishing company is still there, and I hear they are doing better now under new management. I sometimes see their products in the store, and I can still see my handiwork in the design of the packaging. It is a strange feeling to see something you created being used by thousands of people while the person who tried to stop you is long gone. But it is also a reminder that our work lives on even when we move on. I am proud of what I accomplished there, and I am even prouder of what I have accomplished since. I am 38 years old, and I feel like my life is just beginning. I have a career I love, a community that supports me, and the knowledge that I can handle whatever challenges come my way. And if I ever run into another Rick, I know exactly what to do. I will just keep being the best engineer I can be and let the chips fall where they may. Because at the end of the day, you can't build a successful life on a foundation of malice. You have to build it on something real. And that is the most important lesson I have ever learned. I look forward to the future now with excitement instead of dread. I know that there will be more puzzles to solve and more assembly lines to design. But I also know that I have the strength to stand up for myself and the wisdom to know when to let go. My story is one of many in this town, but it is mine, and I am glad I get to tell it. It is a story of hard work and betrayal and ultimately of triumph. It is a story that started with a wrench and a box of desk plants and ended with a ripped-up resume and a new sense of purpose. And I wouldn't change a single second of it.